how do you write a book that has a sustained and developing romance so that someone who started the series in the beginning is still interested in it, but someone who picks up that book right out of the blue can still hook into that romance without the need of having read the previous stuff. And it's been just an interesting learning experience for me, try to figure out how to do that. And then these books have been written now since 1989, and 2 or 3 years ago I was thinking, what? Come on now, how long are these guys just going to hang around together? They're going to fish and cut bait? What's going to happen? But I liked them. You know, I didn't want to knock one of them off, knock off Z, which is always a way to get rid of the,
Which book is it where it looked like you were really going to do that, and I was very apprehensive?
I don't remember which one it was.
I remember. I was really upset because it looked like Z was going to decide that she wasn't going to wait around for JW, or she was going to take an off-island. Wasn't that it?
That's right. It's a book called, well, there's a point here where she decides that she's going to go off to a conference, and it's really a conference about women in medicine. She's considering entering medical school and becoming a doctor. And she's also going to one of these women's conference about the state of women in the United States. She's a very independent person. And she said, I'm leaving. And Jeff Jackson is just, he's really disturbed by this because he loves her and has, in fact, he pursues her, and she says she's the one who stands off all through these books. And
he can't leave the island due to the you're trammeled there with the series there. She's leaving, he's got to stay. That's going to be it.
And by the way, that's the one book where he does leave the island. It's a book called Cliffhanger. There's a scene, the book sort of starts in Martha's Vineyard, and because she's gone away, he's very discontent, and he ends up leaving the island, and there's some scenes that take place up here in southwest Colorado, and some crisis scenes there, and then he goes back, and she comes back, and that's the book where she agrees to marry him.
Right, and I was greatly relieved because I thought, there goes Craig, he's not going to shoot her, he really likes this woman, so he's just going to send her off to, become a doctor or something and bring in, because that is certainly one technique that you could do when you felt that it had run out. She doesn't have to be maimed or dead, she could simply go away, and he could stay there and meet somebody else, but I was relieved. And I don't think that you've lost tension because you've married them off, but you've had to do it differently.
Yes,
which is sort of a challenge.
Can romance exist within the framework of marriage? Soap operas indicate that it can't, but I've taken the position that it can. So once she agrees to marry him, then the next book they're engaged. Right. Then the next book happens 3 weeks before they're supposed to be married. I was still hedging my bets. A lot of many a slip puts the cup in the lip. And then the next, about 50% of the people who write to me they saw this coming. They said, "No, don't let them get married. It'll ruin everything." And the other 50% said, "Yes, let them get married." And so my son's mother-in-law was one of the people who didn't want them to get married. And so she actually said, "If you let them get married, I'm never going to read another one of your books." Well, they get married in the first line of whatever the next year's book, just about 2 weeks after she said that. So I had to write her a little bit. I says, "Well, as long as you don't read the first line of this book, maybe we'll still be friends." So they do get married, and now a year later they're still married.
Well, and I haven't noticed any loss of tension. It's it's a lovely component in the book, and in fact, your books are oftentimes not reviewed as mysteries. They're talked about as books where, and there's a great link between Things of the Kitchen and Things of Crime, culinary crime. It's a whole big subgenre of mystery, but there is something about, maybe it's our basic appetites, linking up here or something. But you do have marvelous food. And the same, Bob Parker's always been praised for the food in the Spencer books, or maybe he overdoes it, or it's a little too, but yours seems so organic to both Jeff and to the place that I've never felt that you were doing food for effect.
No, he cooks the stuff that grows on Martha's Vineyard most of the time. He grows it in his garden, or he catches it in the ocean, and that's the way we eat. My wife, by the way, is a much better cook than I am. I cook, but we mentioned that Shirley's sometimes taken to be the prototype for Z, but we're also beginning to think maybe she's the prototype for JW because he uses her recipes and doesn't give her any credit for them.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. If you start printing recipes in these books, I may have a problem. I don't want you to get to that marketing slant, although there are certainly good mystery series where that happens, but it doesn't seem to me to be
well, I
a
hear,
Jeff
you
Jackson
know, in
thing.
this book that just came out, Deadly Vineyard Holiday, in the back of it are 3 recipes. They asked me to print 3 recipes.
Did they really?
That he mentioned, so there they are.
Okay, well,
So, you know,
I'll have to live with it.
It's predictable.
Maybe I'll white out the last
White out
pages
those
before I
last,
sell
tear
them.
them out,
That's it.
right?
Whatever. But anyway, you do have culinary crime, you do have romance, you do have a tremendous setting, and in general, except for Cliffhanger, the plots are not as thunderously action as Mr. I think with
Yeah.
you, of the 3, the plot comes last. I think character and
that's
setting
true.
mean more to you
I think
than plot.
Absolutely accurate. I always consider myself not a very good plotter because I don't think plot. Quite often when I'm writing these things, I don't know who did it.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and that's interesting.
I find out about the same time Jeff finds out. A couple of times in the last 2 or 3 years, you know, I was about 3/4 of the way through the book before it's, oh, that's who did it. And quite often I have I'm wrong. See? And the next day I say, nah, he didn't do it. And who did it? But about that time, as it turned out, if I've been paying any attention to my writing, which apparently I don't do too well sometimes, the evidence is in there.
Right.
I wrote a book a year ago. I think is it the one that's coming out now? I think it's the one that's coming out next year. Where I finished it in March, but I didn't know who did it till February. I got right to the end and said, yes, that's who did it. And I thought, oh, am I going to have to do a lot of revision on this book? Because I thought I had to add vast amounts and take out things. It turned out that I had to revise it almost nothing. On some level underneath here, apparently I had actually sort of known what I was doing. I sure didn't know up here.
All your little red herrings were swimming towards
Yeah,
the
they
right
were.
harbor,
They were
huh?
all going the right direction.
That's
Yeah,
marvelous.
it was quite surprising. The so-called creative process, which I think you have to use very loosely when you refer it to me, is odd, and doesn't seem to be. Well, we as writers have some relation. Sometimes there are similarities, but vast differences. I have dreamed scenes. I dreamed. Yes, that's the one I needed. I couldn't figure it out when I was awake. I wake up. I'm an old guy, and I'm 63, and quite typical for me to wake up about sometimes 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm lying awake. And I used to just sort of fuss, and now I think about the books. And I've had really major league solutions that have come to me in the middle of the night.
Right? Do you have to get up and write them down?
No, I remember them.
That's wonderful.
So it's just kind of an odd creative phenomenon.
Well, it's been a marvelous series. I myself sometimes think that series have a life of their own, and at some point they end, or you've said everything you have to say, but I haven't seen any evidence at all that that's what's going on so far with JW and Z. I do remember your book, A Double-Minded Men, the theft of the famous emerald necklace from the Padishah.
Famous, yes.
Yes, and you told me then that your editor said, only once, Phil.
No more Padishahs.
That's it.
One was enough, yes.
Can you write something quite that fanciful? But of course, it's a marvelous bauble, and it's a locked room mystery, which is a nice form to give a shot.
Yeah, I had a lot
one
of fun
time
trying to write it. I don't know if I'm smart enough to solve 2 locked room mysteries, but I thought I could add one in me, and I got rid of it in that book. It was okay.
Well, it's fun. It's a locked room mystery is in fact an impossible crime. It's one where you set it up so that it couldn't have happened, and then part of the solution is proving that it could have happened, which does imply, at least in that case, that you did know from the beginning the end, because you really have to write that one backwards.
That's right. Well, I knew the locked room part, but the whole rest of that book is leading up to the locked room part, and I didn't know that when I started. And then what happens after the mysterious necklace has disappeared? Now what? So all the first half and all the second part, I had to write in my normal bumbling way, trying to figure out what I'm doing. But that part I had worked out because I had to figure out how it could be done.
Absolutely. And in order to write that book, which is one where you don't physically go off island, but in fact you've had to create an entire mythical country. And what is it you've mentioned the other day when we were talking that you've had to put in? You had to create a topography and a religion?
Yes.
An economy?
Yes. All of the above. I got out an atlas, and I needed a Middle Eastern country because I needed a place for this stolen necklace, the necklace that was eventually stolen, to have come from, in some semi-believable way. So I had to create a country. I created a country. It had a topography. It had a history. I had to have it have a religion. I had to political backgrounds, warring factions, what were the economic clashes, all that kind of stuff.